Choice, your creative superpower. We have the power to manifest as we dedicate attention to our thoughts, but often miss opportunity to achieve the greatest good. Your superpower is waiting to be unleashed to unlock a fuller, more rewarding world for all. Join us every Thursday at noon Mountain Time for Choice, your creative superpower with Zoe Muro. And now, here's Zoe.
Hello, folks. Welcome to the New Thought Media Network. My name is Zoe Muro, and I am delighted and honored, as always, to be your host for Choice, your creative superpower, coming to you from Oakland, California, each Thursday, 12 noon Mountain Time, 11 a.m. Pacific Time. We are here to explore how wielding your superpower for the greatest good can co-create a most fulfilling life experience. For those of you coming back, it's great to see you here again. And if this is your first time, you are most welcome. So glad that you tuned in. You know, I'm a religious science practitioner with the New Thought Media Network, and I'm also a transformational coach. My ministry as a practitioner, as well as my mission as a coach, are to help people live their lives to the fullest. Today, in episode 66, we'll be exploring the relationship between choice and self-care. Now, 2 weeks ago, just prior to Thanksgiving, when we covered caregiving, I said self-care was so important that it needed its own episode. And so here we are. Now, I am going to present this from the intersection, if you will, of caregiving, self-care, and choice. But this is really important. I want you to please be aware that while I may mention caregivers often throughout the episode, self-care is not just for caregivers. Everyone, and I do mean everyone, needs self-care. No question. So, when we were exploring caregiving, I noted we don't always have a choice in becoming a caregiver for whatever reason. However, even if there wasn't an overt choice made in assuming that role, there are still choices which can be made regarding self-care, which can make the experience far more effective for all involved. Now, I want to start with one of the most prevalent conditions that caregivers face, and that is burnout. What do I mean by burnout? Well, let me bring these up. Specifically looking at caregivers, although I think that, as I said before, this applies to anyone, caregiver burnout is a state of physical, emotional, and mental exhaustion that can happen when you dedicate time and energy to manage the health and safety of someone else. Now, we can take away that last couple of sentences or that last part, that to manage the health and safety of someone else, and just say for yourself. Okay. Caregivers who experience burnout may feel tired, stressed, withdrawn, anxious, and depressed. The reason that we care so much is that caregiver burnout can impact a person in so many ways. For example, physically, psychologically, financially, and socially. Okay. any of those is a possibility. Remove this. There we go. Okay. Before I go any further, let's see what's going on here. Oh, hello, Shay. Good to see you. Hello, Fiona. Fiona is a master practitioner and a blessing here on the New Thought Media Network. She does so much. Serene blessings to you as well, Fiona. Did I mention that we are an international organization? Fiona is in Geneva. Definitely, Shape says she's definitely tired of extreme self-care, processing, and pain management. Whew. Well, it is a lot of work at times, but it is so necessary and so worth it. Now, why do I know that this is so important? If you were to look at statistics as to how prevalent burnout is, studies show, let's talk about caregivers for a moment. Studies show that at least 60% of caregivers experience burnout. Okay, that's a lot. And if we look as a comparison at just people who are working, right, full-time workers, as many as 2/3 of them say that they've suffered burnout on the job. So I would say, yeah, it's prevalent. So how do you prevent burnout? Self-care. What if you're already experiencing burnout? Now what's the solution? Self-care. Of course, there are times, especially as a caregiver, when we just need a break. We need some additional support, a respite. Okay. Got some good news in that respect. There's an organization called ARCH. Their mission, all right, at the National Respite Network and Resource Center is to assist and promote the development of quality respite and crisis care programs in the United States. They are here to help families locate respite and crisis care services in their communities and to serve as a strong voice for respite in all forms. Right. So you can see that their address is up there, gnosishosting.net/portal/registry for ARCH. If you are dealing with any of these issues, I strongly recommend that you take a look at that. All right. Now, hopefully, a situation where you need respite is not necessary, but if it does come up, there are definitely choices that we can make. And there are choices that we can make to avoid burnout, reduce the number of times that it does come up, which clearly is a better approach. We would rather avoid than have to repair. All right. So a lot of it has to do with our preparation. So 3 big factors that I'd like you to consider to help avoid burnout is attitude, time, and attention. Attitude, time, and attention. I put attitude first because it has a profound effect on pretty much any experience that you could have in life. If you have not heard the episode that I did on mindset, I'd strongly recommend it. And attitude is also one of those things that, if we're looking at caregivers, it's really important to understand that being aware of your own attitude during the interactions, and being aware of the attitude of the person to whom you're giving care during these interactions becomes really important. I'll give you an example that doesn't have anything to do with caregiving, but it illustrates the point. And I've chosen to do it this way. In case you are a caregiver, I don't want you to get into an emotional connection with this. So just check this out. Simple example. Let's say you've been invited to a gathering. You're very excited to attend. And then you find out that there's a person you've had a number of poor encounters with who's going to be there. And you go anyway. You're unconsciously, you're actually prepared for more of the same. And sure enough, you find reasons to be irritated. And this can be made even worse if the other person felt the exact same way about you. But choosing to take time to check in with yourself and do whatever you need to center and ground yourself prior to caregiving, or in this particular case, attending that gathering, all right, can make a huge difference. So if you have in your mind that something is terrible, you're going to probably produce a terrible result. If you take it as being something that simply must be addressed, recognizing the importance, recognizing the benefit, all right, that can make a huge difference. So take time, if you're a caregiver, to ground yourself, to center yourself, and then check in with the person that you're caring for. All right. So that ability to check in, that ability to be aware, right, allows us to have an attitude that makes things so much easier. Okay. Now, let's talk about time. As a caregiver, you might not have the luxury of being able to expend as much time as would be necessary to ensure proper care. You need to choose. Okay? Now, what's the choice here? The choice is to be honest with yourself and be honest with the person being cared for, if that's appropriate. All right. Working together, or at least working with your own understanding of what your schedule is, what your energy is, all of that, right? That can allow you to put together a reasonable schedule. And it also can point out when and where additional resources may be necessary. I was a caregiver for my older sister, Ellie, prior to her passing. She lived in Kansas. I live in California. As much as I was able to get to Kansas to take care of her as often as possible, obviously I couldn't be there all the time. I had to accept that limitation as a caregiver. But I couldn't simply say, well, when I wasn't there, she wasn't going to be cared for. So I had to work with that limitation. I had to work with what was going on and find ways to deal with it. All right? So we all have limitations. Being aware of them and accepting them, finding ways to mitigate them, is a far more effective strategy than allowing guilt to consume you. And I know that we often talk about how in spirit there are no limitations. And I am not negating that at all. But what I am saying is that there are 24 hours in a day. Right? We can only be awake for so many of them. We can only do so many things. Right? This physical body in this physical plane definitely has limitations. Right? So being able to work with another person, another organization, whatever it might be, becomes crucial. And of course, the idea of respite and support comes to mind. And then there's attention. All right. Simply being physically present is one thing, but being present and attentive, that's another. So just as we have only so much time, energy, finances, so too do we have a finite amount of attention. Your ability to provide good care depends on your ability to focus and to be attentive. If you find yourself to be distracted, first of all, I want you to pause and take stock of what's going on. Depending upon what task is unfolding, your ability to be focused and attentive could be critical. Okay. Choose to prepare yourself for those tasks, doing what you can to make them as straightforward as possible, and put aside for the time being whatever it is that might be hindering your efforts. So being able to recognize that a particular activity, now remember, we're not just talking only about caregivers, we're talking about all of us. If there's something that you need to attend to and you have limited time, attention, energy, being able to understand what needs to happen and when, prioritizing, is part of self-care. I have to say, from my own experience and working with a large number of caregivers over the years, sometimes the strategies work really well. And other times, they simply point out that there's a need for additional support. Now, it's unfortunate that people feel this way sometimes, but it is not uncommon to see caregivers feeling guilty or shameful that they have to ask for help. You know, whether it's help with a specific physical task or a particular medical procedure, whatever it might be. We're just dealing with a difficult emotional situation. Finding someone to confide in, being able to get that respite, that break, maybe getting counseling or joining a support group, right? All of these are signs. They're signs of emotional strength, not weakness. They are signs of being a truly caring person, not a neglectful person. Okay. And remember, each and every one of us in our life has primary responsibility for one human being. If you have a mirror nearby, take a look in it. That's the one human being that you have responsibility for. And therefore, making sure that you have what is necessary for your well-being is not a sign of weakness. It is indeed showing strength, no question. Another important element of self-care. This is one of my favorites, boundaries. Setting them, communicating them, maintaining them. Now, I explored boundaries in a lot of detail in episode 23, which was last December. So I won't get into a lot of detail here, other than to allow, I have a couple of quotes here that I want to use because I think these provide exactly what needs to be said here at this point. So let me bring this up. It's from Jeanette Corin. You have to love and respect yourself enough to not let people use and abuse you. You have to set boundaries and keep them. Let people clearly know that you won't tolerate to be, how you won't tolerate to be treated. All right. Let people clearly know how you won't tolerate to be treated. And let them know how you expect to be treated. Okay. And this one. Our boundaries define our personal space. And we need to be sovereign there in order to be able to step into our full power and potential. Okay. All of this is most certainly part of self-care. Okay. Would also say that it's important to look at self-care from a very holistic perspective. Because what we choose to do to enable self-care is never actually done in a vacuum. It's not done without affecting other dimensions of well-being. Now, what do I mean by that? Let me bring this up. Okay. This is a model for wellness or well-being that was developed by Dr. Bill Hetler, in which he posits that there are these half dozen dimensions to wellness: vocational, spiritual, social, physical, intellectual, and emotional. So in order to be addressing your wellness, sorry, folks, in order to be able to address your wellness, you really need to be looking at all of these and understanding how one fits with the other. Okay. Now, we explored wellness in 3 episodes. All right. It's that large a topic. It was episodes 20, 21, and 22. Those are actually the 3 episodes right before we covered boundaries. So I don't want to repeat all of the details from 3 episodes. Obviously, I can't do that. But I will highlight a few points that are noteworthy for our exploration today. Specifically, I want to talk about the dimensions of physical, emotional, social, and spiritual well-being. Physical, emotional, social, and spiritual well-being. Okay. And remember, this is just a very, very brief discussion of these. The choices that you make as a caregiver regarding your physical well-being, unfortunately, are often thought of as being optional, where they're nice to have. But that's exactly what we want to avoid. If a caregiver is struggling to get through the day or get through the night and has neglected their nutrition, neglected their sleep, their ability to give care is going to diminish, even to the point of the caregiver becoming ineffective as a caregiver and becoming incapacitated. And that serves no one. And this one's going to be kind of strange. I'm even going to include exercising as being important here. I know. Sounds like an odd thing. But, in some cases, the caregiver literally needs strength to provide proper care. But regardless of whether it's a physical need or not, just walking and stretching has significant benefits. All right. And once again, bear in mind, we're not just talking about caregivers. We're talking about what it means for you to provide self-care. Okay. And yes, everyone, without exception, everyone needs to do some sort of exercising in some way, shape, or form. If you are physically capable of movement, Your ability to move is going to help your joints. It's going to help your muscles. It's going to help your physical ability to stand and deal with balance. So many different things are so important. So exercise. And it doesn't have to be spending an hour in the gym. It doesn't even have to have anything to do with the gym. It doesn't have to have anything to do with weights. You can do magnificent things with stretching, with body weight exercise, with Pilates, with yoga, so many different options. If you don't know how to do these things, hey, we're in luck. We have YouTube. You can find examples of any and all of these things. And frankly, I would tell you folks, if you're having difficulty in trying to find the things that you need, send me an email. Let me bring up my email address here. Okay. Send me an email at zodemuro@gmail.com. All right. Be more than happy to point you in the right direction. I was a physical trainer and a performance coach for many years. So I have a tremendous amount of knowledge in that area. All right. So we know how important taking care of ourselves taking care of ourselves physically is. Another often overlooked dimension of wellness that can contribute significantly to self-care is the social dimension. Might seem odd, but it's true. Choose to make time for yourself so that you can engage with family or friends or literally just be by yourself. Sometimes that's important. And if you are a caregiver and you get together with other people, sure, you're going to spend some time talking about caregiving. But be clear that this is also a time that you need so that you can decompress. You want to be heard. You want to engage in a conversation that can lift your spirits and energize you. Think of it as recharging your batteries, restocking the cupboard, filling the gas tank. You get the picture. That leads logically to the dimension of emotions. I know that sounds weird, but it's true. Because just as the person receiving care could be experiencing and expressing a variety of emotions, so too does a caregiver. I wanted to say, rather than so could the caregiver, I wanted to say so should, only because so many caregivers believe they can't express their emotions around caregiving, or they might seem to be complaining or lacking compassion. But folks, there are definitely times when it is extremely difficult to manage one's emotions. And it might not always be appropriate to express them to the person receiving care. That is absolutely true. But it does become crucial to share them, where they just wear you down bit by bit. Choose to incorporate rather than isolate. Right? Choose to incorporate rather than isolate. All right? What I mean by that is recognize there's actually a number of people involved in providing care. There's yourself. Potentially, there's friends and family. There are the professional caregivers. There's doctors, nurses, etc. Sharing information and experiences can help enormously. There are also support groups for caregivers, which might prove useful. And, if you're not dealing in a caregiving situation, you're simply looking at your own self-care. Folks, we are social animals. As much as you might think, I can do this myself. I really don't need anybody. I'm self-sufficient. The reality of it is, our very DNA is set up for us to be with others. So find that support. Maybe it's a support group. Maybe it is a community, a spiritual community, some sort of self-help community, whatever it might be. Find a way to be engaged. Find a way to incorporate. Okay. Most importantly, be gentle with yourself. Self-compassion is definitely a key aspect of self-care. I'm going to go over today. Whatever. It might not always be appropriate to express what you're feeling to anyone and everyone that you're speaking to. So you find the right person. Being heard, being witnessed is something that can just bring about such a wonderful feeling of comfort. We don't necessarily even need to talk sometimes. All right. We just need to be comforted, centered, and grounded. That's the spiritual dimension of self-care. Sorry, folks, I have a monitor that keeps going off here and I can't stop it. As a spiritual advisor, as a practitioner, there are times when I'm called upon to pray on behalf of a person in need of support. And I'm delighted to do that, of course, if the person is accepting of prayer. But more often than not, my prayer actually addresses the requestor, helping them to focus on the grace and comfort that they want to connect with, as well as the greatest good of the person they're concerned for. And there are many different ways that we can take care of ourselves spiritually. There, of course, is prayer. There's counseling. There's meditation, visioning, reading, affirmations, singing, dancing, conversations, discussions, explorations such as we do here. All of these are spiritual tools. And when time is of the essence, or logistics make it just too difficult to actually attend a service or a discussion in person, hey, we're in a great situation because we always have online access to these things. And here at the New Thought Media Network, we endeavor to make the largest number of spiritual tools available. So I would strongly recommend checking out all that we have and know that there's even more on the way. And we're just one place that you can go to for this spiritual support. Bear in mind that what makes any spiritual practice appropriate and effective for you is how much it resonates with you. Some days meditation just doesn't work, but listening to a meditation, that does, right? Having that guided approach rather than a completely wide open approach. Sometimes sitting in silence, surrounded by trees, or maybe in a park, or your backyard, or even just looking at pictures of nature, right? All of these can provide that feeling of calm. Sometimes it's about being together in community, right? Don't allow yourself to become judgmental as to what it is that you feel that you need. And, oh, this worked so well in the past and now it's not working. That's all right. Pivot, adapt, explore. If all else fails, call someone who can remind you of who and whose you truly are. and allow that grace to comfort you, to revitalize you. You know, I mentioned compassion before. I want to highlight it yet again. In his book, Creating a World That Works for All, Sharif Abdullah refers to compassion as being love's verb. He says, compassion is love's verb. And he gives us this quote from a theologian by the name of Marcus Borg, which I'd like to bring up. It says, compassion is a grace, not an achievement. Its constancy does not ultimately depend upon effort of will, but upon a relationship to the Spirit. And folks, what are we all about if not a relationship to the Spirit, a relationship to who we truly are? So if you take nothing else away from this exploration, hold on to the idea of compassion. Compassion for others, compassion for yourself. Your self-care will benefit. Guaranteed. All right. Well, that's going to do it for today. Yeah, I did go over a little bit, but I wanted to be able to get these details in. If you would like to explore more about choice, more about self-care, or if you would like to get some help, you can always contact me at zodemuro@gmail.com. Let me know that you had been listening to the show and what it is that you're looking for. And I will do my best to help you. Or I will do my best to provide a possible avenue for a solution. Okay. So I want you to know that anytime that you contact me, whatever you share with me is always held in complete confidence. And I want you to know that it was an absolute delight spending time with you this week. I mentioned looking around at newthoughtmedia.org. I strongly suggest that you do. Today, for example, very typical Thursday would be Finding the Joy in the Journey at 1 p.m. Mountain Time with Reverend Gina Cavario-Krupka. 2 p.m. Mountain Time, the Vibrant Living Hour with Practitioner Ken Ludwig. 4 p.m. Mountain Time, Spiritual Toolkit, presented by Reverend Brock Ford. So all of this wonderful information and exploration and consideration of who and whose we are is brought to you here on the New Thought Media Network. And if it at all possible, go to ntmedia.org/donate. Help us make this a world that works for all. I look forward to seeing you again next week, folks. Until we meet again, choose well, choose wisely, choose often, and know without a doubt that you are magnificent, you are loved, and you are so very, very blessed. Namaste.
Choice, your creative superpower. We have the power to manifest as we dedicate attention to our thoughts, but often miss opportunity to achieve the greatest good. Your superpower is waiting to be unleashed to unlock a fuller, more rewarding world for all. Join us every Thursday at noon Mountain Time for Choice, your creative superpower with Zoe DeMuro.